What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for the first NHL Deal or No Deal of the season. If you're a newer subscriber and you haven't seen one of these before, it's a pretty simple concept. Basically, all it is, I make a post on the community tab asking you guys to submit mock trades. I pick out a bunch and we break them down in a video, and I give my take on if I think it is a good deal or no deal. This is the longest running series that I have on the channel. I believe the first episode was posted back in January of 2019, so in just a couple of months, the series is going to be 5 years old, which is insane. I don't usually do this because I feel like asking for likes at the beginning of a video doesn't make much sense, because how does the viewer know that they are going to like the video if they haven't watched it yet? But for the first deal or no deal of the season, let's see if we can hit 1,000 likes. That'll let me know that you guys want to see more of these in the months leading up to the trade deadline. And as always, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the episode off with the first mock trade from Laine. Hopefully I'm saying that properly. I apologize if I butchered your name, but the mock trade is a trade for struggling prospects. Podkolzin for Victor Soderstrom, a 1-for-1 trade of two young players who have trouble finding their game. A new scenery could help. So we have a couple of players here that were drafted one pick after each other in the lottery of the 2019 NHL draft. Podkolzin selected 10th overall by the Canucks and Soderstrom 11th by Arizona. We are now in the 5th season following these guys' draft year, and neither Podkolzin or Soderstrom have been able to crack their respective NHL rosters full-time. Podkolzin actually did play a full season with Vancouver back in 2021-22, and he scored 14 goals in 79 games while playing very limited minutes. However, since that season, Podkolzin has not progressed the way I'm sure the Canucks were hoping he would. Victor Soderstrom has managed to produce that around a half-point per game pace throughout his American Hockey League career so far, but whenever he's gotten an opportunity to be called up to the Coyotes, he hasn't really taken the ball and ran with it. I think this is a solid mock trade. I don't think it's too early to start talking about a shakeup for either of these guys. Is the value 100% even? Probably depends on who you ask, but I'm going to go ahead and say deal to this one. The next mock trade we have comes from Awesome Zach, who says Noah Hanifin to the Jets for Brendan Dillon, Ville Heinola, Chaz Lucius, and a 2025 second. The Jets could use another top 4 D-man like Hanifin. Dillon would be the contract going back. Heinola has not worked out in Winnipeg and can be a solid piece on Calgary. Lucius also isn't developing that great and can maybe find his game in Calgary. I think I'm going to go ahead and say no deal to this one right from the hop. The Winnipeg Jets have had a really strong start to the season. Defensively, they have been good, and guys like Dylan DeMello and Brendan Dillon have played a big part in that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Brendan Dillon is a better defenseman than Noah Hanifin, because he's not. I think everybody knows that, but I'm just not sure with the way Brendan Dillon is playing right now that the upgrade from Brendan Dillon to Noah Hanifin justifies giving up all these additional assets like Heinola, Lucius, who is a former first-round pick, and a second, especially when you consider the fact that Noah Hanifin would likely just end up being a rental for Winnipeg. It's been reported in the past that he does not plan on signing an extension with Calgary and wants to test free agency, so I feel like the odds of Hanifin signing an extension with a different Western Canadian team are pretty low. So for those reasons, I'm going to say no deal to this one. Moving along now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Mason Jar, who says to Edmonton, Mackenzie Blackwood, to San Jose, Jack Campbell, a 2024 first and a 2025 second. The Sharks are going to be bad for a while and should be focused on acquiring draft capital, while the Oilers need a goaltender badly while getting out of the Jack Campbell contract. Blackwood has shown he can steal you some games and might be a good fit to cover for Skinner during his sophomore slump. You're definitely on the right track here. The Oilers need a goaltender, and they need one soon. Stuart Skinner last night against Carolina, another dud of a game, 4 goals against on 8 shots. He was pulled. They wound up losing that game 6-3. Mackenzie Blackwood would be a cheap option for the Oilers to target, as he would certainly be an upgrade over the goaltending that the Oilers have been getting so far this season. That being said, I am going to say no deal to this one, because I don't think any team in the league, even San Jose, would be willing to take on Jack Campbell's contract. He still has 3 seasons left after this year at a cap hit of $5 million. If the Oilers are going to move this Jack Campbell contract, I think it's going to cost them a lot more than a first and a second round draft pick to do so, especially in a trade like this, for an example, where they would also be getting Mackenzie Blackwood back. So this wouldn't just be a pure cap dump for the Oilers. You're also getting back an upgrade in net. A couple of examples of cap dumps in recent years: the Red Wings once got a second round round draft pick to take on the final year of Mark Stahl's contract from the Rangers. The Leafs had to attach a first round pick to unload Patrick Marleau to the Hurricanes. Calgary had to give Montreal a first to take on Sean Monahan. So you have to think the price to take on Jack Campbell for 3 more years after this season would be astronomical, and I don't think it's something that the Oilers would seriously consider until we're in the final couple years of that deal. And to be honest, I'm expecting the Edmonton Oilers to just buy out Jack Campbell way before his contract gets into the last year or two. Moving along now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Gavin Rector, who says to Boston, Elias Lindholm and a 2024 fourth, to Calgary a 2025 first, 2024 sixth, Matt Grzelcyk and Fabian Lysell. If the Boston Bruins are going to go out around the trade deadline and make a big splash and look to add, which why wouldn't they? Elias Lindholm should be a prime target for them after losing Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci to retirement in the offseason. Although the team still looks perfect without Bergeron and Krejci, adding a two-way top 6 center like Elias Lindholm definitely wouldn't hurt. Aside from the fact that he is just a fantastic player, another reason why Elias Lindholm is such a valuable trade chip right now is because of the fact that he has a cap hit of just $4.85 million, and in this particular mock trade with the Matt Grzelcyk contract going back to Calgary, these two teams would probably be able to make the money work rather easily. Maybe Calgary would have to retain a little bit on Lindholm. I really like the idea of this mock trade. I think it makes a lot of sense for both sides. We're still all kind of waiting to see what Calgary is going to do with all their pending UFAs like Hanifin, who we talked about already in this video, like Nikita Zadorov, and like Elias Lindholm. In my opinion, it would be a huge mistake for the Calgary Flames to try and bring those guys back, Lindholm and Hanifin especially, because they are such valuable trade chips, because they are guys that would likely fetch Calgary massive returns, and I feel like it's became very clear that this Calgary Flames core just isn't it. It's not working. That team needs a big shakeup, and I feel like moving on from guys like Hanifin and Lindholm would set the Flames up nicely to move in a little bit different of a direction. Now, are the Calgary Flames getting enough value back for Lindholm in this mock trade? I think they are. You're getting 2 first-round pick level assets in the 2025 first, and Fabian Lysell, who is a first-round draft pick in 2021, someone who I think still has a lot of upside, and with that first-round draft pick not being until 2025, it could wind up having a lot of value. I really like this mock trade for both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and say deal. The next mock trade we have comes from Neo, who says to New Jersey, UC Saros, to Nashville, Vitek Vanacek, Seamus Casey, Nathan Bastian, and a second and third round draft pick in 2025. Devils still need to fix their goaltending issue, and I believe that's a major part of their early season struggles thus far. As for Nashville, they have Askarov developing nicely, and Vanacek's contract will likely take them to the time when Askarov can take over. Bastian is a solid bottom 6 hard worker who can help Nashville in all situations, and obviously Casey and the picks help build for the future. I certainly agree with you in the sense that goaltending has been a major issue for New Jersey early on this season. They are one of the highest scoring teams in the league, have the league's best power play, and yet they're currently just 500 with a record of 8-8-1. They haven't been getting many quality starts at all from either Vitek Vanacek or Akira Schmid. So New Jersey is another team like Edmonton, although their situation isn't as scarce as the Oilers, that could be in the market for a goaltender, and UC Saros would definitely fit the bill. Obviously, he struggled a little bit to start this season, but so has the majority of the Nashville Predators team. Before this season, UC Saros, basically every year since becoming a full-time NHLer, has been viewed as, one of the upper echelon goaltenders in the NHL. Saros is signed at a cap hit of $5 million through next season, which I think is a very team-friendly contract. And with this particular mock trade, the money works out almost perfectly with Vitek Vanacek and Nathan Bastian's cap hit going back to Nashville. When it comes to the Nashville Predators, I think them heading in a rebuilding direction is long overdue. In my opinion, UC Saros is going to be a name that will be front and center in trade rumors as we get closer and closer to the deadline. And when it comes to this mock trade, I think the Predators are getting pretty decent value. Like you mentioned, Vitek Vanacek can be a guy that plays out the remaining years of his contract there in Nashville and serves as kind of a stopgap as they wait for Askarov. And then obviously the big pieces of this deal are Seamus Casey and the second and third round draft picks. If you're not familiar with Seamus Casey, he was a second round draft pick by the Devils in 2022, and Seamus Casey is a guy that I view as a blue chip prospect. So much potential. He has the upside of being a elite top pairing puck moving offensive defenseman. He has 20 points this season in 14 games with the University of Michigan. A little bit undersized, which is always something that's going to be brought up when talking about prospects, but in the modern NHL, I think Seamus Casey is going to do just fine. This is another mock trade that I really like. I know there's probably some Nashville fans out there that don't think this is enough value in return for UC Saros, considering, how good he's been for Nashville for so long, but I'm really high on around Seamus Casey, so I'm going to go ahead and say deal to this mock trade as well. Next up, we have a mock trade from Zachary LeBlanc, who says the Hawks get Klingberg in a 2025 second, and the Leafs get future considerations. Personally, think Klingberg would fit perfectly on PP1 over Seth Jones. Klingberg gets some minutes, Leafs get money to go after, Party Kane, win-win. So a pure cap dump here for the Maple Leafs. The John Klingberg one-year deal in Toronto really hasn't worked out. He's not healthy. He's out right now with an injury that apparently has been lingering throughout his entire career, and it's something he's always dealt with. Right now, it seems like we're actually heading towards him potentially being placed on the long-term injured reserve, and if that happens, obviously the Leafs wouldn't have to worry about attaching a draft pick or prospect to him to unload his contract. So I'm going to go ahead and say no deal to this one and kind of wait and see how things play out when it pertains to the injury John Klingberg is dealing with. I think it's more likely we see him on LTIR, honestly, than involved in a cap dump trade. Moving along now, this next mock trade comes from Hollywood TTV, who says Columbus trades Laine, 25% salary retained. Anaheim trades Isaac Lundestrom, Jacob Perreault, and a second. Ducks get a much needed boost from a natural goal scorer on the right side, in which they only have Terry. Bogru has played well, and so Lundestrom isn't necessarily needed anymore. Columbus would get help from Lundy's defensive forward style and a former first round pick in Perreault who could shoot. Second is just a cherry on top. You guys submitted a ton of Patrik Laine mock trades. Obviously his name kind of sparked up in trade rumors after the healthy scratch and the comments that he made after being scratched, but I am going to go ahead and say no deal to this mock trade. It has nothing to do with the players you have Anaheim giving up for Laine. I just really cannot see Columbus moving him. Laine is an expensive player. He makes $8.7 million and is signed through 2025-26 at that $8.6 million cap hit, and he is a struggling forward right now, and one that's that expensive obviously isn't a very valuable trade asset, so I don't think it makes any sense for the Blue Jackets to sell low on Laine right now, and when he inevitably heats up, because I think he will, they're probably not going to trade him then either, because Columbus is a team based off the moves they made in the offseason. They want to compete right now. So those are the main reasons as to why I'm going to go ahead and say no deal to this mock trade. I just cannot see Columbus even really entertaining the idea of trading Patrik Laine, at least right now. The next mock trade we have comes from Lucas Dorita, who says Anaheim trades John Gibson to the Sabres for Isaac Rosen, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and a second. And also really appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you enjoy these kinds of videos. I honestly think John Gibson would be a perfect veteran goaltender to bring in to kind of take some pressure off Devin Levi and really show him the ropes. I think Eric Comrie is fine, but John Gibson would be an upgrade over Eric Comrie. He's having a bounce back season. In 11 games, John Gibson has a .927 save percentage, which is way up from his previous 3 or 4 seasons in Anaheim where he really wasn't the greatest. The only kind of hitch I would say about this mock trade is the fact that Gibson is pretty expensive, $6.4 million, is signed through 2026-27, and there would definitely be some risk involved to taking on that contract, as like I mentioned, John Gibson over the last 3 or 4 seasons really hasn't been the greatest. And on top of the risk of taking on that contract, you also are giving up a guy in Isaac Rosen who was a lottery pick by the Sabres in 2021, somebody that has a lot of upside, and then also the second round draft pick, so basically a first and second if you want to look at that way. So I think that might be a little bit too much for the Sabres to give up, while also, you know, weighing the risk of taking on a 30-year-old John Gibson at $6.4 million. So again, I like the idea of Buffalo trading for John Gibson, but not really at this price, so I'm going to go ahead and say no deal. This next mock trade comes from Jesus Malone, who says Kakko and a third for Taylor Hall and a sixth gives Bedard a young right winger who can attempt to rebuild his career with some size, and it puts Taylor Hall as a sniper on a competitive team. The New York Rangers are pretty tight to the cap at the moment, but if they could find a way to make the money work, I actually really like the idea of this one. Chicago could retain 50% of Taylor Hall's $6 million cap hit, make him a $3 million player, and then you'd only have to make up like $900K or so with Kakko going back to Chicago, which is easily doable. We saw the Rangers go out and acquire 2 wingers around the trade deadline last year in Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. Obviously, neither of those guys have returned to the team, at least yet anyways. In Patrick Kane's case, he's still a UFA, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Rangers are in the market for an offensive-minded winger again. Taylor Hall obviously fits the bill, and with this mock trade, they wouldn't have to give up any of their top prospects or a first-round draft pick because you have a guy in Kakko who, him being, you know, a former top 3 pick, I still think gives him value in a trade, even though his career has been pretty shaky up until this point and he's having a down year. He's a guy that I think a lot of people believe would do a lot better in a different situation situation on Chicago, getting an opportunity to play top 6 minutes, potentially playing with Bedard. That sounds really enticing. Maybe that unlocks an element to Kakko's game at the NHL level. I also feel like with the breakout season Lafreniere is having, it makes Kakko that much more expendable. So I really like this mock trade. I'm going to go ahead and say deal. And now finally finishing out the episode with a mock trade from Caleb Green, who says to Calgary, John Klingberg, Ronnie Hanifin, and a 2024 third round draft pick. To Toronto, Nikita Zadorov, and a 2024 sixth. I think there's actually a good chance we see a trade similar to this happen. As we all know, Nikita Zadorov made kind of a public trade request, or at least his agent did, and it's been reported that Toronto is among teams interested, and he would be interested in going to Toronto, and I think he would be a good fit for them. Obviously, you know, a big, mean physical defenseman, but also has some offensive upside and is pretty mobile for his size. I think if you're Calgary, you take this mock trade in a heartbeat, getting a guy like Ronnie Hanifin for Nikita Zadorov. Hanifin is a guy with a lot of upside. He's done really well in the Liga over the last couple of seasons before coming over to North America this season. If you're the Leafs and you can go out and you can get Nikita Zadorov for a price similar to this, not having to give up a first or second round draft pick, I think you do it. Overall, I think this mock trade is pretty fair for both sides, and since it's one of those mock trades where I feel like there's actually a good chance we see something similar to this happen, I'm going to go ahead and say deal. So that is going to wrap up the first NHL deal or no deal of the season. Like I mentioned at the beginning, let's try and hit 1,000 likes on this video. That way, it'll let me know that you guys want to see more of these in the months leading up to the deadline. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so let me know how you feel about any of these mock trades down below in the comments. Would you say deal? Would you say no deal? And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.